Good morning and welcome to Branson Legacy Sabbath School. It's the beginning of a new year, and I hope that this year is going to bring you everything that is good and wholesome and healthy and happy and blessed. At the beginning of this program, I'm going to ask Peter to lead us in Bible reading, prayer, and introduction of our program today. Thank you, Peter.
Happy New Year to all. Our Bible reading today is from Psalm 113 and from 2 Peter chapter 3. I'll start reading from New International Version. First, Psalm 113. Praise, O servant of the Lord. Praise the name of the Lord. Let the name of the Lord be praised, but now and forevermore. From the rising of the sun to the place where it sets, the name of the Lord is to be praised. The Lord is exalted over all the nations, his glory above the heavens. Who is like the Lord our God, the one who sits enthroned on high, who stoops down to look on the heavens and the earth? He raised the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash of heap. He seats them with princes, with the princes of their people. He settles the barren woman, her home, as a happy mother of children. Praise the Lord. And it was a hymn of praise of God. Now, 2 Peter chapter 3. This chapter is titled The Day of the Lord. Dear friends, this is now my second letter to you. I have written both of them as reminders to stimulate you to wholesome thinking. I want you to recall the words spoken in the past by the holy prophets and the command given by our Lord and Savior through your apostles. First of all, you must understand that in the last days scoffers will come, scoffing and following their own evil desires. They will say, "Where is this coming he promised? Ever since our fathers died, everything goes on as it has since the beginning of creation." But they deliberately forget that not long ago, by God's word, the heavens existed and the earth was formed out of water and by water. By these waters also the world at that time was deluged and destroyed. By the same word, the present heavens and earth are reserved for fire, being kept for the day of judgment and destruction of ungodly men. But do not forget this one thing, dear friends. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understood slowness. He is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar. Elements will be destroyed by fire. And the earth and everything in it will be laid bare. Since everything will be destroyed in this way, what kind of people ought you to be? You ought to live holy and godly lives as you look forward to the day of God and Spirit's coming. The day will bring about the destruction of the heavens by fire, and the elements will melt in the heat. But in keeping with his promise, we are looking forward to a new heaven and a new earth, the home of righteousness. So then, dear friends, since you are looking forward to this, make every effort to be found spotless, blameless, and at peace with Him. Bear in mind that our Lord's patience means salvation. Just as our dear brother Paul also wrote, you with the wisdom that God gave him. He writes the same way in all his letters, speaking in them of these matters. These letters contain some things that are hard to understand, which ignorant and unstable people distort, as they do the other scriptures to their own destruction. Therefore, dear friends, since you already know this, be on your guard, so that you may not be carried away by the error of lawless men and fall from your secure position, but grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and the Savior, Jesus Christ. To him be glory both now and forever. Amen. In this chapter, the Apostle Paul is challenging us with a question that could be our New Year resolution. The question is, what kind of people we ought to be in light of the things that are going to happen? And the Apostle, it's answering, it's giving us an answer that we should live holy and godly life. But of course, each one of us can answer in our own way as a New Year resolution. Let us pray now. Holy Father, together with the King David, we want to praise your name for the many blessings we have received during the past year. And please, Holy Father, continue to bless each one of us during this new year. Bless our families, bless this class, and help us, Father, to grow in grace and in the knowledge of Jesus Christ. In his name we praise. Amen. Today, the topic of our class will be AI. That stands for artificial intelligence. Well, it's a new discovery, and as we know, as every new discovery has positive things and negative can be used in a negative way. Our main interest is from the moral standpoint, how artificial intelligence can be applied. And we have for this, for our discussion, an interview with Professor John Lennox, which is considered a specialist in this domain. Now back to you, Simona.
Thank you, Peter. And Monty, we are ready for the video. Thank you.
And it's not so much a question of optimism or pessimism. It's just, again, a question of acceleration. AI can also do wonderful things for humanity. It can help us in healthcare, developing better medicines. It can help us in education. It can help us deal with climate change. It's just extremely powerful. And I think it's developing at a faster rate than I expected. When I wrote Homo Deus and 21 Lesson, I didn't think that in early 2023, AI would gain this kind of mastery of language so that it will be almost impossible to know whether a text or an image or a song has been composed by a human or by a machine.
Hi, welcome to the show. My pleasure to be here as your host. Just call me T+. This show is called InnoMinds, a forum for leaders in tech and politics to discuss how to solve today's problems with today's tools. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Youval Noah Harari, a renowned historian who offers thought-provoking insights on the future of humanity, and Audrey Tang, Taiwan's digital minister. In this episode, we seek to understand how humans will cope with the rise of AI, what a real digital democracy could look like, and how to deal with common ethical questions in our century. Before we get started, I want to introduce our two guests today. Hailing from Israel, Professor Harari gained worldwide recognition in 2014 with the English translation of his book Sapiens, which tells the story of humankind from the Stone Age to the 21st century. His essay 21 Lessons for the 21st Century focuses on topics like the one we are discussing today, which is AI and its implications for democracy and authoritarianism. Harari is one of the major thinkers of our time, who sees the study of history as a way to broaden our perspectives and to make us become aware of possibilities we don't normally consider. Hi, Youval.
Hello, it's good to be here and thank you for inviting me.
Audrey Tang is Taiwan's digital minister. She became Taiwan's youngest minister without portfolio in 2016 when she headed the public digital innovation space. She has been a hacktivist for over 2 decades. She is also a promoter of open source innovation. Hi, Audrey.
Hi, and hi, Harari. Good to catch up after 3 years now, after the pandemic.
To start things off, I want to ask, Harari, can you briefly comment on how you see AI as a part of human history and evolution?
Yeah, it's a completely new chapter in history, maybe even in the history of life on Earth, because AI is different from every previous invention in history, from every previous tool in history. All previous tools empowered humans because the decisions about how to use the tool were always left in the hands of human beings. When people invented stone knives, so you can use a knife to kill somebody, you can use a knife to save their life in surgery, or you can use the knife to cut salad. The decision is in the hands not of the knife, but of the human being. It's the same when people invented nuclear weapons or nuclear energy in general. You can use nuclear energy to produce cheap electricity. You can use nuclear energy to destroy cities and countries. The decision is in human hands. But AI is different. AI is the first technology that can make decisions by itself. Therefore, there is a danger or possibility that it will take power away from us instead of empowering us. AI can make decisions about its own usage. It can also make decisions about our lives. Increasingly, when we apply for a loan to a bank or we apply to a job or whatever, it's an AI making the decisions about us. And AI is only making its very, very first steps. We haven't seen anything yet. So the big danger we are facing is that humans might lose control of the future to their own creation, which will turn out to be far more powerful than we are.
We are indeed embarking on a journey into uncharted territory. Audrey, can you briefly state whether you are supportive or skeptical of developments in AI?
Well, I support lowercase AI, which I call assistive intelligence. The kind of AI like my eyeglasses is transparent and accountable to the dignity of the humanity of human beings. Of course, if it's uppercase AI, sometimes called authoritarian intelligence, then I agree with Youval that it can take agency away from people closer to suffering and end up letting just a few dictate the life of the many. And in a little bit like, I guess, coronavirus with gain of function research, I guess, there is also a more remote but still significant risk of AI just spiraling out of control. And so therefore, I think this kind of super uppercase full width AI, this is something that we're all very concerned about.
I see. Only time will tell whether we'll succeed in making AI a useful ally rather than an oppressive tool. Professor Harari, are these concerns the reason why you signed a petition in March 2023 to put a moratorium on the development of AI systems more powerful than GPT-4?
Because the development is moving so fast, and the stakes are so high that we don't really understand what we are facing. I talked earlier about the ability of AI to take power away from us. Now, within a very few months, we saw that AI can also take culture away from us. All human culture, all human civilization is ultimately built on language, on what we are doing right now, having a conversation. Religion is based on stories that we tell each other and that we put in books. Politics is based on stories that politicians tell us and in conversations between citizens. Economics is also based ultimately on language. Money is just a story. For tens of thousands of years, humans ruled the world because we could cooperate better than any other entity on Earth, thanks to our ability to tell stories. If you want to have millions of people cooperating on something, you do it by telling them a story. And now, within just the last few weeks or months, AI has made this tremendous breakthrough of gaining mastery or partial mastery of human language, not just in words, but even also in images, in sounds, in music. Actually, you can't even be sure if what I'm saying right now and the images you now see on the screen, maybe it's not me, maybe it's an AI, maybe it's a fake video. A year ago, you could be sure, now you can't. What would it mean for AI to gain mastery of language, and with this potential mastery of politics, economics, religion? Maybe we'll see religions based on holy books written by a non-human intelligence. Now, there are so many different possibilities there, and we just need time to understand what we are facing and how to deal with it. We'll talk later about the specific dangers to democracy, which again, democracy ultimately is a conversation. What is a democracy? It's lots of people coming together, talking to each other in order to reach some decision, some consensus, instead of having a dictator telling everybody what to do. It's a conversation. Conversation is based on language. When AI hacks language, it could destroy democracy. So we need time to understand all this and to adapt. And for that, we need just to slow down. That's the most basic request. Please slow down so we have the time to understand and to adapt.
From what I've just heard, it's essential for us to slow down and ponder the ramifications of our inventions. Given the precarious position we are in now, do you hold a pessimistic view towards the future of humanity?
And it's not so much a question of optimism or pessimism. It's just, again, a question of acceleration. AI can also do wonderful things for humanity. It can help us in healthcare, developing better medicines. It can help us in education. It can help us deal with climate change. It's just extremely powerful. And I think it's developing at a faster rate than I expected. When I wrote Homo Deus and 21 Lesson, I didn't think that in early 2023, AI would gain this kind of mastery of language so that it will be almost impossible to know whether a text or an image or a song has been composed by a human or by a machine.
Audrey, you were a freelance digital advisor involved in artificial intelligence projects. How has this professional experience shaped your view on AI, and what are your thoughts on Youval's predictions?
Yeah, it's true that between 2010 and 2016, right before I entered the cabinet, I worked closely with the Siri team at Apple on conversational AI. And in particular, I work on cloud language localization, meaning that we bring this kind of interactive conversation assistive intelligence to people who speak not the majority languages, but lower resource languages, languages with fewer people speaking. And And even then, we saw that indeed, if Siri only speaks in English or Mandarin and not making any effort to communicate in other languages, it can actually create epistemic linguistic injustice to people, because they then will have to force themselves to speak those languages. The other thing was that if Siri causes harm by hallucinating, right, by just making stuff up instead of looking up on Wikipedia or Warfarin Alpha or other more trustworthy tools, then it can also damage the fabric of trust, because there are people who just simply believe whatever their personal assistant, in this case Siri, says, and just relay that information as if that information comes from that person. And so if people keep doing that, and if Siri doesn't have quality assurance checks, then it causes something like the CFCs, the freons, caused to the ozone layer last century around 70s, 80s, because then the information ecosystem will be populated by this semi-true, true sounding, but not actually true information, and people will just lose confidence in online interaction altogether. So we did think about that 2010 to 2016 a lot. And nowadays, it seems like what we were worrying about is very quickly, as Youval said, accelerating into reality now, because without advanced digital signature systems, indeed, the interactive deepfakes, nobody can tell whether this image comes from Audrey or not. And if we end up to the state where we only trust the people physically in the same room are people, then we lose the fabric of trust that enable international coordination to, for example, solve things like climate change or pandemic.
When we talk about the future of AI, we tend to forget that this revolution is not just about software, it's about hardware as well. Audrey, could you tell us more about the role Taiwan plays in the supply chain of hardware for AI?
Well, it's relatively well known that the most advanced chips are produced mostly by TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Company. And of course, MediaTek, Foxconn, and so on are all major players in the productions of not just semiconductors and processors, but also the electronic components that are essential to the AI technologies. And moreover, we're also working with the entire supply chain to democratize the AI use in the language models, for example, so that we call this edge computing or AI on chip, so that you can run a reduced and therefore not as powerful in creating deepfakes, but still very useful way to, for example, understanding human speech closer to the device. So you do not have to send those sensitive or confidential information to the so-called cloud, that's to say other people's computer, but rather these edge AI systems can help people to, for example, translate between different language and so on closer to the components. And because Taiwan excels in chip making and quick iteration on deploying those chips into the field like autonomous vehicles and so on, we have a pretty robust ecosystem to make these narrow AI application work in a very quick fashion. But with that experience, of course, we're now turning our eyes on general purpose AI, which, as Youval said, carries a very much larger risk area than those narrow AI industries that Taiwan is more known at.
Youval, what about the role of Israel in the global development of AI?
Yeah, even though it's a very small country, it plays a significant role. There are many research centers here. It also plays an oversized role in the specific areas of cyber weapons, surveillance technology. This is because, you know, of the military involvement of Israel and also of the occupied territories. Unfortunately, we have a lot of experience in using AI in order to control millions of people against their will. And also, unfortunately, my country or companies in my country have been exporting these sometimes dangerous technologies to regimes, including undemocratic regimes, in many other places around the world. So like almost every few months, you have this new scandal of an Israeli company that turns out it sold new software capabilities to some regime in order to spy on journalists or on human rights activists or to meddle in national and local elections, which again, shows us the developments in this global age, and with this kind of global technology, developments in one country can spill over to many other countries. And Israel right now is also in a very difficult situation of the government trying to take over the judiciary system, gain unlimited power for itself, and basically turn Israel into a dictatorship in which the government can pass any law it wants and even rig the elections without any checks and balances. So the combination of these very powerful technologies and AI tools with a regime that has no limits on its power can have very dangerous implications, not only for people within our own borders, but also for many other areas across the world.
The subject at hand is quite serious. Do you believe that the advancement of technology is closely intertwined with the future of our political systems?
You know, democracy always depends on technology. This is something that is often not obvious to people, but it's a very plain historical fact. Before the modern era, we have no examples whatsoever of a large-scale democracy. We have a lot of examples for democracies in the ancient world, but they are all very small-scale and local. Most hunter-gatherer bands and tribes had a more democratic political system. It was quite rare to have a dictator in a small band when people can, everybody knows each other, everybody trusts each other. It's not a good place to have a dictatorship. But when human societies began to grow, and you have big cities and kingdoms, and the kingdoms also get bigger, then democracy becomes almost impossible, and dictatorship becomes or one sort or the other of an autocratic regime becomes the universal norm. Why? Because you can't have a public conversation about politics in a large territory with hundreds of thousands or millions of people. In a small city like ancient Athens, or in a hunter-gatherer tribe, everybody can meet, know each other, have a discussion, and decide what to do about war and peace, about economics, whatever. In a large kingdom, it was impossible. So we don't have any examples of a large-scale democracy until the emergence of modern communication and information technology in the 18th and 19th century, first with print and newspapers, then with telegraph and radio and television and so forth. And this, for the first time, made it possible for millions of people spread over a large territory to have a political conversation, to develop trust, and to think together or discuss together what to do about the major issues of the day. In this sense, democracy depends on technology. And every major change in communication and information technology in the last 200 years also led to a change in the practices, in the nature of democracy. So what we are going through right now fits this pattern, that we are now in the midst of another major revolution in communication and information technology, and it is bound to change democracy. The worst case scenario is that it will destroy democracy, because new information technologies can undermine the ability to have a conversation and to have trust between people, and can instead empower totalitarian regimes that are also dependent on technology. In the ancient world, the people had many autocratic regimes, but they could never establish a totalitarian regime. The difference between autocracy and totalitarianism is that autocracy, all the political power is concentrated in the hands of a small elite of one emperor, but they don't intervene in the daily life of most people because they can't. If you sit in the capital city of the Chinese Empire, you cannot know what each individual is doing in every remote village of the empire. So they live most of their life without your control. Totalitarianism became possible only, again, in the 20th century because of the same information and communication technologies that also enabled democracy. The same tools of print and radio and telephone and all this, it also enabled somebody in Beijing or Moscow or Berlin in the time of Nazi Germany to know what each person is doing in each remote village and try to control that. And this is the big question we now face with AI and with all the other new information technology. Will we know how to utilize them to strengthen democracy and create digital democracies? Or will they lead to the emergence of digital dictatorships, which will be far worse, even the Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union?
That was very insightful. It leads me to another question. Do you think authoritarian states will gain the upper hand in the AI race?
Well, they have an advantage and a disadvantage. Because the new technology, especially AI, makes it possible to concentrate a lot of information in one place and analyze it efficiently in one place, this could make authoritarian and totalitarian regimes even stronger than before. But they also have a disadvantage, which is they don't usually have strong self-correcting mechanisms. The emperor that controls everything is a human being. No human being likes to admit mistakes. When you're a totalitarian ruler, you use all your power to shirk responsibility. If you make a mistake, let's say in how you deal with an epidemic, or you decide to invade, like Putin decides to invade Ukraine, and it's a terrible mistake, you never admit the mistake. There is no power in the country that can hold you responsible. There is no independent media. There is no independent political parties. There are no independent courts. So within the country, nobody holds you to account. And you use your control of the media, of the political system, of the courts, to put the blame on somebody else. There are enemies. There are traitors. And you demand even more power for yourself to deal with these so-called enemies and traitors. So authoritarian and totalitarian regimes, when they make a mistake, they usually only amplify it. Democracy's big advantage is that when the government makes a mistake, the journalists expose it, the courts can take action, there are elections, you can change the government. So democracies are better at correcting their own mistakes. Now, AI also makes mistakes. AI is not infallible. One of the dangers we face with totalitarian regimes is that they will create this super totalitarian regime based on AI, which will make mistakes, and they will have no mechanism to correct these mistakes. And this can be disastrous for the country itself. And if the country is very powerful, this could be disastrous for the whole of humankind.
Audrey, what might the democratic counterpart to what Youval just described look like?
Yeah, so in the last century, in 1980s, the 80s saw the idea of personal computing, where a person has a computer that works to the benefit of that person without the more classical mainframe, or now they will call it cloud computing. As a metaphor, that's the distinction between my eyeglass, which again, as I mentioned, helps me see things better, but it's entirely accountable to me, versus a camera that takes everything that I see, send it to some cloud somewhere for it to be processed and sent sent back to my retina, right? In which case, of course, that totalitarian apparatus on the cloud would also have a copy of whatever I was seeing and maybe keeping it in perpetuity in a record somewhere to do accurate precision persuasion technology on me, right? So this idea of personal computing, while relatively new, is actually very powerful. It enabled people to come to terms with technology for themselves. Like I have on this laptop some assistive intelligence that help me to transcribe everything that I have said. But I can rest assured that it works without an internet connection, that it would not send anything that I say to anywhere else, and so on. And so in Taiwan, personal computing grew in tandem with our democracy. It enabled journalists to do what we call data journalism nowadays, to analyze the governmental records independently and so on. It also enabled new ways of social organization, because on each laptop and each desktop computer, people can host bulletin board systems, places of gathering, and you just need a telephone connection and a modem, and everybody can dial to your personal computer from their personal computer and form a small internet of like-minded people to talk about democracy and so on. And that fits a bill of the kind of a public square, and like in ancient Athens, right, around 100 people or so, at most 1,000 people or so, know each other pretty well in these smaller gatherings. So I would say that Taiwan's history of democratization depends on this kind of grassroots assemblies of personal computing together, instead of this like flatten everything on this cloud-based social media. We're much more comfortable with this kind of grassroots organization, and that is the main difference of our democracy versus the previous century ones.
Could you provide more insights on how AI can contribute to democracy?
Well, there are, of course, authoritarian, even totalitarian use of AI. I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that the kind of AI that I deploy on my laptop here is not that sort of AI. It is rather the assistive sort of AI. And you can easily tell the difference in how the harm is redressed, right? If my eyeglass breaks, I can just fix it manually with some super glue. I actually just did that a couple of weeks ago, and I know exactly how it works. And if I have a glass repair friend down the street that I trust, I can also hand an eyeglass to them without, signing this NDA and paying a huge amount of license fees or something like that. But if this is not accountable to me, then I actually cannot seek redress for the harm that it causes when I wear it. Maybe it's so addictive and sticky that I cannot take it out, right? So basically, you can very easily see the difference between assistive intelligence versus authoritarian ones in whenever there is harm. Does the harm gets fixed, redressed in the here and now? Or is it redressed only after a lot of appeal, or even there's no way to seek redress to the harm?
Professor Harari, I want to pass the question to you. Do you believe that AI could actually improve liberal democracy?
Yes, it certainly can. I mean, as I said before, democracy is based on technology. When we have better technology, it is possible to have better democracy. But unfortunately, it is also possible to have more powerful totalitarian regimes. So ultimately, it's a question of not the technology itself, but the decisions that we make about how to use the technology.
Youval, you often talk about hackable humans. Do you think AI could hack the youth to actually go vote?
Yes, but unfortunately, it can hack people to do all kinds of things. To vote, not to vote for this candidate, for that candidate. Over the last 10 years, we saw with social media the immense power of very primitive AI. Because there was AI in social media, but it didn't produce the content. I mean, all the videos, all the texts, it's humans were producing them. The AI only decided, in many cases, what to show you at what moment, or what to show to what person. And even though this was a very primitive AI, it was still extremely powerful, and it completely changed the political landscape. Many experts believe that what we see in many countries, including my own, of political polarization, the breakdown of democratic conversation, is to a large extent the result of these primitive AI, which are given the task of increasing the time users spend on the platform, because this is how the companies make money. And they did it by flooding people with videos and texts that made people angry and fearful and hateful, because this is the way to grab their attention. There was a battle for attention. Now with the new generation of AI, the battlefront is shifting from attention maybe to intimacy. You know, the most powerful way to get to know somebody and also to persuade them to change their minds about something is through an intimate relationship. Now, previously in history, nobody could form such relationships other than human beings or animals like your dog. AI couldn't do it, computers couldn't do it. Now they can, because most relationships are based on language. And we can now see a new generation of bots, armies of bots, who are busy not in diverting our attention, but in creating intimate relationships with us. You know, you go online, you spend hours, maybe days and weeks, talking with someone, forming a relationship. You're convinced this someone is a human being, but actually it's an AI that gets to know you and then uses it to gradually and subtly influence your political views. So it could influence you to go vote or to not vote, or to vote for this or that candidate. And this is extremely dangerous. Again, if we allow something like that to happen, for companies and political parties to basically mass produce intimacy using AI, this will destroy the foundation of human society, which is based ultimately on intimate relations between people. And it will also be extremely harmful to human psychology. Just imagine what it means that increasingly many of your most important relations are with AIs.
This definitely sheds light on the intricate situation we face today. Thank you to Professor Harrari and Audrey for joining us. We've been talking about the implications of artificial intelligence for humanity and contemporary democratic systems. In the next episode, we'll discuss liberalism, AI ethics, and possible solutions for making the most of the digital revolution. And if you like today's episode,
but AI is different. AI is the first technology that can make decisions by itself. AI can make decisions about its own usage. It can also make decisions about our lives. Increasingly, when we apply for a loan to a bank, or we apply to a job or whatever, it's an AI making the decisions about us. So the big danger we are facing is that humans might lose control of the future, their own creation, which will turn out to be far more powerful than we are. Actually, you can't even be sure if what I'm saying right now and the images you now see on the screen, maybe it's not me, maybe it's an AI, maybe it's a fake video. What would it mean for AI to gain mastery of language, and with this potential mastery of politics, economics, religion? Maybe we'll see religions based on holy books written by a non-human intelligence. Now, there are so many different possibilities there, and we just need time to understand what we are facing and how to deal with it.
hi, welcome back to Innovative Minds. I'm your host, T+. Here with me are Youval, Noah, Harrari, and Audrey Tang. We previously explored how artificial intelligence will most likely impact humanity and modern democratic systems. Now let's dig deeper into the topic. In terms of political spectrum, Harrari, you are a strong advocate of liberalism because you believe that it has proven itself to be superior to all alternatives so far. However, you have cast doubts on the data processing speed and capability of modern liberal institutions, indicating the lack of such capability could ultimately lead to a shift of authority from humans to networked algorithms. Does your position remain?
Again, it's not a prophecy, it's just a warning. It could happen. And liberalism is based on the belief in the agency of individuals. And what I just described is a means to destroy the agency of individuals. And if you know how to hack people, if you know how to manipulate them, even on the level of creating these kinds of intimate relationships with them, then this destroys the foundation of any liberal society. Authoritarian societies, dictatorships will be able to flourish in this situation. You know, for a dictator, the best thing in the world is to break relations between people. The greatest danger for any dictator is when people trust each other, because then they can organize themselves against him. But if people can't organize themselves, if people don't trust each other, this is kind of a greenhouse for dictatorships. So I'm not saying that it is inevitable that AI will hack human beings, will destroy relationships between human beings and destroy liberalism. But it's a very big danger, and we need to take action now in order to prevent it.
Audrey, do you think that AI will help governments to address the challenges of the 21st century?
Yeah, I think the key, and I quote from what Youval said to me 3 years ago, the key is to create stories that can serve us without being enslaved by those stories. I think a key part of democracy is to make sure that the kind of stories that offers the antidotes, like when people listen to those stories, they understand that it's not the only way for example, the social media to lead to polarization. There are many people who participate in projects, for example, the community note volunteers on Twitter, who also work with a sort of AI, although the algorithm is open, to compete, not to polarize, but rather to depolarize, to find the kind of story that when someone gets outraged by a certain tweet, immediately by reading that community note, the outrage is taken away and make way for instead recontextualization to understand a fuller picture of what is going on. And a key insight in the community note algorithm was that we need to find the bridge makers, the people who make the stories, and the stories make sense to people on both sides of polarization. And once we can give the platform the visibility to those bridge-making stories, then people, after reading those stories, re-engage as democratic citizens in a more constructive mode. So I would argue that there are also certain kind of assistive intelligence that are pro-social in social media, in fostering the human flourishing by associating together to form meaningful organization links, only if we can systematically give more visibility to the bridge-making stories rather than the polarizing stories.
It's good to hear about cases where AI can help appease public debate. Audrey, could you tell us more about how the Taiwanese government has been using a platform like Polis to make itself more accessible to citizens?
Yeah, so it was kind of a precursor to the community notes that I just mentioned. In fact, Polis influenced directly the design of the Twitter community notes. In 2015, we were also facing an onslaught of a kind of AI called UberX, right? It's a kind of AI that reliably dispatches somebody close to you to pick you up and charge you for it. And they say that it's not a taxi service, it's just an AI that helps the riders and the drivers to find each other. But the entire society, of course, was quite polarized in 2015. There are people who think, oh, this is the beginning of this sharing economy platform era. But there are also people who say that, no, this is a way for algorithm to exploit people so that they become interchangeable parts in the gig economy and so on. So we deployed the Polis tool to bring together the people who are on both sides of polarization to share their experiences and find out the shared common values hidden in plain sight. For example, people all agree, actually, that it's okay to have surge pricing, but not undercutting existing meters, because that would be unfair to the labor condition. That they should also serve the rural areas and empower the co-ops locally, not just serve the urban area where it's profitable, that insurance is supported and so on. So once people people actually saw everybody agree with each other on most of the ideas most of the time. They do not get distracted endlessly on those one or two polarized topics, but can actually very quickly form the rough consensus, which end up becoming, Uber becoming the Q taxi fleet, but also the local co-ops and social entrepreneurs can also enjoy surge pricing and at best dispatch. So it turns a zero-sum or negative-sum game into a positive-sum one by engaging a higher bit rate of co-creation. So it is deliberative democracy, but also at scale.
In October 2022, the White House released the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. This non-binding text lists 5 principles that safeguard AI users' freedoms, including the right to be protected from unsafe or ineffective systems. Is this a step in the right direction?
Yeah, it's a very positive step. And of course, any attempt to deal with a very complex issue, so you have different suggestions, you try something, maybe it doesn't work so well, you try something else. It's a process. It's not like we have these fixed principles and that's it, we solve the problem. I would like, though, to point out one very significant element, which is that we need to think beyond the level of a single country. We need to think beyond the level of a specific democracy, even. The question is often global, because we see global immense disparities in power between different parts of the globe. One of the biggest dangers with AI is that this technology is being developed by a very small number of countries. The United States and China are, of course, the two big ones. Then you have maybe half a dozen or a dozen additional countries, which are important. And most countries are not really in the game. They are affected, of course, by the technology, but they are not the ones leading the AI revolution. And there is a very big danger that what happened in the 19th century with the Industrial Revolution will again happen in the 21st century with the AI revolution. That the few countries who develop the technology will have the power to dominate, exploit, maybe even conquer all the rest. In the 19th century, to control a country, you needed to send the soldiers in, to send an army in. In the 21st century, increasingly to dominate a country, you don't need to send the soldiers in, you just need to take the data out. If you have all the information on every politician, every judge, every military officer, every citizen in some small country in a part of the world, you can control it from a distance. And also economically, if the immense wealth generated by AI will make a few rich countries even richer, while undermining the economies of much of the world, this again, it's a huge, huge danger. And when we think about AI, yes, we have to focus on questions like the ones you mentioned in this document, of how to protect the citizens of an individual democracy. But we always also need to have a plan for how to protect humanity as a whole from such dangerous developments like an increase in global inequality.
What are your thoughts? Audrey?
Yeah, definitely everything Youval said. And I would also add one thing. I think the current generation of language models show a possibility actually for linguistic communities around the world to equalize the playing field of their local knowledge, their local language and so on, if they're given the kind of rights as language communities to collectively determine what goes into the language model, how the language model is used, and whether the language model enhances their cultural norms or destroys their cultural norms. I totally agree that countries are maybe not the best abstractions to think about this. Just like we mentioned the pandemic or ozone or anything that is truly global in nature probably should not be ruled on a country boundary. But language models or social cultural constructs that are based on linguistic boundaries, that are actually a pretty good abstraction. We've already seen, for example, people in Iceland government taking a hold of their own language represented in the OpenAI language models through an early partnership. And now here in Taiwan, because we have 20 national languages, some Austronesian, some based on kanji, and including the Taiwan Sign Language, we're also investing a lot to make sure that the language communities in Taiwan gets the kind of honor and dignity in their culture with the language models, instead of everybody now suddenly having to learn perfect Mandarin or English or other dominating languages. So I would advise thinking along the linguistic and cultural boundaries more compared to the jurisdictional boundaries.
Now I want to talk about AI ethics. Professor Harrari, you offer a thought-provoking perspective on the direction of history. You believe that there is absolutely no proof that human well-being improves as history rolls along. Building on top of that, what kind of AI ethics could avail us a better future?
First and foremost, to remember that ethics is ultimately about suffering. That morality doesn't mean obeying the laws of some god. Morality doesn't mean obeying the laws of some government. Morality simply means helping liberate sentient beings from suffering. This is morality. It's not always easy, because sometimes the same action protects some people or some beings from suffering, but could cause a certain amount of suffering to others. So we saw during the pandemic, you need to put people in lockdown. Of course, they are not happy about it. It's not pleasant. It could be quite miserable to be in lockdown, but you need it to protect people from worse suffering, like dying from a disease. So it's very, of course, complicated to weigh these things one against the other, but all these ethical arguments are ultimately in terms of suffering. This will cause some suffering to that person, but will liberate that person from a certain danger. And we need to keep this in mind when we come to deal with AI also. It should, ultimately, the discussion should be about suffering and liberation from suffering. And we should also remember that, as far as we know, AI itself cannot suffer. It has no, as far as we know, it has no consciousness, it has no feelings, it can't feel pain or pleasure or love or fear. So it's a tool that could have a huge impact on sentient beings, but it is not sentient itself. Of course, the whole discussion will completely change if and when AI becomes conscious and becomes an ethical agent and an ethical subject that can also itself suffer or be happy. And I think this is maybe the biggest unknown about the whole field of AI, is whether AI is anywhere on the road to developing consciousness or not, and how would we know? There are huge debates about it, but there are no easy answers. But all the time, whenever we talk about ethics, we need to remember that it's really a discussion about suffering.
Yeah, definitely. When we say AI is assistive, at the very least, it needs to be harmless, helpful, and honest. Honest being the most important to me, because it's easy actually to evaluate whether it causes toxicity, like immediate harm, or whether it's being helpful or actually misleading people and so on. But honesty is difficult to measure, because whether something is truthful or not depends on context, and AI gets used in all sorts of different contexts in which honesty is gauged differently by different communities. And so I think really to alleviate suffering, we need to delegate the kind of alignment, like the social norms around what counts as honest and also harmless and also helpful to the particular communities that deploy the sort of AI to help such communities. There's probably no one-size-fits-all measurement evaluation when it comes to honesty. And I would also argue that even on harmless and helpfulness, there's also community differences across the world. So the more that we delegate to the people closest to the suffering, these kind of evaluations, and for those evaluations to meaningfully affect the constitution of that particular AI instance that they're deploying, the more we resemble this old personal computing for community infrastructure point of view that can empower particular communities. So that is actually the direction we're taking in making sure that the democratization of AI use is in the hands of the citizens. And once we do so, one benefit is that more and more people will come to understand the AI systems and make contributions on how to understand the levels of intelligence or even eventual consciousness of such systems. And once we are armed with that kind of insights in AI evaluation and safety and so on, then we can with more confidence say, okay, research should go this way because this will not accidentally create conscious but misaligned beings, and research should instead go this way because we understand those guardrails better now.
Knowledge and citizen empowerment will be the key to successful integration of AI into our lives. Expanding upon that, I want to ask, how can we make sense of our lives in face of the acceleration of history?
So it's just that as things move faster, it's more difficult to make sense of what is happening. And when you no longer are able to make sense of what is happening, you lose your agency. As a citizen, if you can't do that, if you can't just make sense of reality, then you don't know what to do. And then you expect some authority figure. It could be traditionally a human being, like a big political leader, a dictator. They can make sense. They will decide for me. Or you expect the technology, okay, the AI will make sense for me. Like you'll ask ChatGPT or GPT-4, please explain to me what is happening and what should I do? And increasingly just follow its way of viewing the world.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of our work during the pandemic, politically speaking, is just to continue to make sense every day, and not by the government publishing the numbers, but by the government amplifying the part of civil society, of journalists, of civic technologists, of the local organizers, and so on, that manage to make some local sense, and then our government on a national scale just magnify whatever sense that is being made on those local scale and empower them because they're closest to the suffering. And I increasingly think that is really the only way to keep the corridor, the very narrow corridor between state overreach on one side and state doing nothing and chaos on the other side, is just to ensure that people who manage to still make some sense on a local scale gets all the resources they need to broadcast their new ideas, which make sense of the new situation, the latest coronavirus variant, the latest infodemic variant, the latest interactive deepfakes. If somebody started to make sense and say, aha, I understand the root cause of this, we need to find somebody else and give them all the platform and make sure that the entire country, the entire democracy world learns about those ideas.
I see. It's all about proper allocation of social resources. On another note, Youval, do you believe it's possible to envision a non-biased AI?
You know, this was a dream or an assumption in the beginning that, okay, humans have biases because we are these messy biological creatures with our psychology and childhood. But AI, this is pure mathematics. Mathematics don't have biases. It will be okay. And now we know this was wishful thinking, that mathematics have biases and even AI has a childhood. One of the chief sources of bias in AI is their childhood, which is the period when they are trained on a certain database. The same way that we as children, we are trained on a certain database of words and stories and encounters, it's the same with AI. And if we hear a lot of racist things when we are young, it creates a racist bias in us. It's exactly the same thing with an AI. You train an AI on a racist bias, you get a racist AI. So in this way, it's not so different from us. Of course, we want to reach the point that we create an unbiased AI, just as we want to create unbiased people, but it's probably equally difficult to do it with AI as it is with human beings, because there is no such thing as a completely unbiased data set.
Audrey, what kind of assessments has your office made to protect citizens from AI-based discrimination?
Of course, to name and surface the harm and seek immediate redress, that is the most important thing. But I would also say that we want AI systems to have a bias for harmlessness against harm. We want them to bias for helpfulness against, toxicity. We want them to have a bias to be more honest, to prefer integrity over telling lies and making things up. These are not often thought of as biases, but these are biases because in the raw training data, there's a lot of toxicity and dishonesty and just the ideas of like random writings on the internet will all exhibit pro-social behavior. That is, of course, not true. We already know it's not true. So there is a part of the alignment, that is to say, bringing those raw AI systems, especially language models, to the community norm that we should really focus on. And so in the National Institute of Cybersecurity, which I also had, we're now working to make evaluations and certifications of AI systems that are willing, of course, they are not subjects, they're makers that are willing to go through this kind of inspection on the raw data collection, on the reinforcement training to fit the human norm, the continual evaluation, including so-called red teaming, like people deliberately trying to trick the language model to say something that is not meant by its makers and the society, and only when they survive and pass all those certification and exams, being a good assistive member to the society, do we then give a certificate to say, okay, this language model is good to use to translation under these criteria, and if you find anything wrong, here are the ways to seek redress and correct its behavior.
Considering honesty as a desirable bias is enlightening. Youval, in what way do Audrey's comments inspire you?
In many ways. I mean, it shows, as a historian, my tendency is to focus on the negative scenarios, to warn people about them. It's makes me very hopeful to hear somebody in a position of power, a senior politician, that has such a deep grasp of not just the dangers we are facing, but also of the positive ways that we can address these problems and fix them. And I think more generally, it's just so good to see, again, somebody senior in politics who has such a deep grasp of the technological developments, which are perhaps the most important developments in the world now. You know, so many politicians that have a lot of power, but they don't have this kind of deep understanding, and they are often focusing on the wrong issues. And another thing is that, you know, so many people who have the deep understanding of the technology, they don't go to politics. They understand AI, so they say, wonderful, I'll do my startup and I'll make billions out of it. It's rare to see somebody who says, I have a deep understanding of AI, I'll go to politics in order to make sure that there are the proper regulations, that the AI is used for the benefit of society. And I hope that Audrey will be an inspiration for many other people in the tech world or coming out of the tech industry to also think about going into politics, because ultimately, again, as we said in the beginning, every technology can be used for good or for bad. The people who make the technology, they can't decide in the end how it will be used. In the end, it's always a political decision. So we need good and committed politicians who understand the technology to make sure that we make wise decisions.
This seems like a good time to ask you to put yourselves in each other's shoes. Audrey, if you could teach a subject at university and write a book, what subjects would you choose?
Well, that's a great question. So I'm actually writing a book. It's called plurality.net. It's a new way of thinking about technology in something that is actually enhancing democracy instead of creating this big gulf between, as Youval just said, the people who are good at technology and the people who are good at politics, at democracies. I believe that if we think about those pro-social technologies together, then we can actually build a bridge so that collaborative diversity, the ability to systematically generate this kind of bridging narratives and systems can be a shared project between the people who focus on technology on one side and the people who focus on democratic politics on the other side. So I will probably be teaching this plurality.net book at a university. And I think this is really getting a lot of academic support now that we have the Plurality Institute and so on, with a lot of people really focusing on the kind of fabric of trust that can actually survive this interactive deepfake making AI onslaught. This is probably the most important imminent issue that we need to apply the academic insight on to create a system where we can then use to coordinate on solving other problems caused by the AI. But first, we must not lose our coordination power across countries.
What about you? Youval, what would be your first decision as digital minister?
I'm not sure about the first thing, but I think, like in the health ministry, you have a lot of focus today on food diet, the understanding that the food we take into our bodies, long before we have any disease, let's try to look at the food we take into our body. I think it's the same with the information, that we need an information diet to help people and give guidelines to people, also to companies, everybody needs an information diet. That we are often so careful about the food we put into our mouths, and we are so careless about the information we feed our minds. Again, we sometimes, for hours, gorge on junk information or information filled with hatred and anger and things like that. So I'll try to have this project to help people be more mindful of their food, of the information diet, and also to schools, to the market, the same way that you have warnings. You can sell something with lots of fat and sugar or whatever if people want to buy it, but you have to put a warning on it. Maybe we need the same thing for information, that, okay, you want to watch this video, but just know that it is 40% hatred, 20% greed, and 20% fear. And if now this is what you want to feed your mind, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think nutrition labels for information sources is great. We are, in fact, having a platform in which the journalists, professional journalists in Taiwan, are talking to the Facebook and Google nowadays, because they also feel that whatever journalism they produce, if they are good for the health of the mind, but not good to, clickbait, engagement, and things like that, then Facebook and Google simply doesn't give them the platform, right? So they are now seeking redress, saying that this is like a global harm, which is harming the ability for people in the democracy to think, right? And we already got pretty good answers from Google, who want to invest in this co-prosper fund to make sure journalism still function well. But increasingly, I think this is basically an essential service for people in a democracy. Like if they do not, the largest platform do not agree to contribute substantially to the balanced information diet, including fact-based journalism, then maybe they should actually just be labeled as such, as in like info hazards, providers, and so on, exactly as how Youval suggested. Yeah.
Youval, what are your thoughts on this conversation with Audrey?
As I said, I feel more optimistic, seeing that there is again, I tend to focus on the dangers and the problems, and seeing that there is so many good things that we can do to mitigate the problems and to make the best of AI. And again, like I said several times, it has also wonderful potential, which I didn't speak about much because other people are doing it. But if we know how to use it properly, it could be one of the best inventions, maybe the best invention that human beings ever made.
It's good to hear that. Do you have any question for each other?
Maybe just maybe to ask Audrey how she manages her own information diet, and if you have any tips for keeping your mind sharp and clear to deal with all these big issues.
Sure, and it's quite well known to people in Taiwan. There's only two things. One is that I always sleep for at least 8 hours a day. And second is that I never touch a touch screen for more than a couple of seconds. I always have this shield of a stylus or a touchpad or a mouse or a keyboard, because if I touch the touch screen for more than a few seconds, my brain thinks it's part of me. And then it would just refuse to give up the scrolling and things like that. And so in order to counter this addiction, I simply say, no, I never just touch the screen, except sometimes to zoom things in and zoom things out. But I always treat it as a toxic surface, so that I will always keep a distance between me and the screen.
Thank you. I've never heard that before, and I think it's maybe in Taiwan you know that, but in Israel, in much of the world, people still haven't realized it. So thank you for this.
I hope it's one of the ideas that makes sense to counter the incoming challenges that we're all facing. Yeah.
We've been talking with Audrey Tang and Professor Youval Noah Harari about the future of humanity, as well as solutions to make the best out of the digital revolution. We hope you found this conversation informative and engaging. If you like today's episode, be sure to subscribe, share, and let us know what you think. See you next time.
Thank you very much. I found this extremely interesting. I hope it will generate a good discussion after our break. So we'll reconvene at 11:56 Pacific time. See you in 10 minutes. Welcome back. I thought this was a very thought-provoking discussion with lots of input, both on the potential negative and potential positive sides of the AI. And it was a very insightful comment that Professor Harari made, that it's much of the way how AI depends, how AI behaves depends on his childhood or the type of learning that he had in the beginning. So I went back to some of my notes from the AI course that I took, and it reminded me that there are 3 types of learning that machine learning actually has to go through. The first part is supervised learning. In other words, is the learning where the system or the machine or the artificial intelligence, if you will, is told what is correct and what is incorrect. Then the next part is unsupervised learning, when we give it basically sort of training wheels and a set of data, and we expect that it's going to come up with certain answers, but we still check the answers. Just like when you teach a child in school, you give them homework, but then you check their homework to see did they come up with the right result. And then if they pass all these tests, they're supposed to go into reinforcement learning, where that reinforcement is basically learning on a spiral, where each cycle of learning helps you to achieve more learning in the next cycle. And obviously it is really important how you conduct these tests. So just a couple of weeks ago, we had, that was actually in November last year, there was a big report in the newspapers, in the media, about United Health, which used an AI model with a very high error rate, and it used it to deny care. So lots of people who should have received care, who should have received medication or treatment or surgery or whatever, they needed to get better, were denied based on this artificial intelligence or machine learning algorithm that was created based on data that was not good. So the primary set, the start of the learning, was incorrect, and it had a bias towards preserving profit versus preserving health. So these things, I think, are important, and I think, as in many other things, the issues of ethic, what is right and what is wrong, is very important. Ethics is what makes communities survive or not survive, thrive or not thrive. And ethics is what makes tools use beneficial or not beneficial. And it is probably a good idea to consider that when there is a system that's powerful but has no ability to have conscience, so no ability to say what is right and what is wrong ethically, then those who are wielding those tools are the ones who are making these decisions. Putting a powerful tool into the hands of people who have no conscience is very dangerous. As we have learned in the past, and fortunately we may not learn in the future, but the history sometimes teaches us otherwise. So a little bit of caution, I think, is important, and I kind of understand where Professor Harrari is coming from. He is a student of history. He is looking at what happened before. How did we use the tools that we have received so far? And humanity is not known for using good tools only for good uses. So every tool can be used for good and for bad. With this, I'm going to give it back to Monty for our discussion, and I hope that I'm going to see some hands as well. If not, if there are no hands, I will have to ask you to contribute. Thank you. Thank you, Monty.
All right, thank you, Simona. I do not have any hands up as of yet for people in the queue. I'll say one thing that question that came up for me is wondering about tools for identifying content that has been created by AI. Because I think oftentimes there is, of course, as you were describing, Simona, the need to have people who are using these tools to have sound standards, but we can't depend on that. And so what can we depend on? Is there any way to screen information sources? And I might have missed it, but I didn't hear any discussion of that. And that's one of the things that I've always kept my ear open for. So if I'm watching a video, is there a way to, for example, or listening to a conversation, how can I screen that for having been manipulated? As of now, I just have sources to depend on, which I actually don't like doing. But that's the main tool that I have. I don't have any.
I see Yoli has unmuted.
Yoli has unmuted. I see that. So I will go to, thank you, Simona. I'll go to Yoli and I'll continue to watch her hands.
Good morning and thank you. He made one statement that I found a bit problematic because he said something about AI can do things by itself, almost like it has its own mind and can do, but that's not true. It is still human beings that are programming AI. AI is created by humans using computer algorithm. It's just intelligence in machines. Living beings and things are formed through natural processes and organisms such as evolution. And so therefore, one thing he says that I understand, because a while ago, Monsanto created a seed that was that they were calling it Terminator seed. That was very dangerous. And what they did, they had to put a moratorium on its ability to sell that seed, because once after the first harvest, the seed becomes sterile. And not only that, it ruined the soil. So many poor countries were devastated by that. So I understand his concern, but I find AI very, very, very important, especially for democracy and for the poor as well. Because now I find AI more inclusive, because they have children all over the world able to access it, learn, and be included. It created a big tent in a way. And so I like that part. And I like his definition of ethics as well. And I love Audrey, because her response were more calm. I found Mr. I believe his name was Harrari somewhat nervous about the whole thing. I think he can relax, because those things happen all the time. As soon as something happens, everyone wants to be the first one in order to control others. All the larger countries, of course, are gonna use that in their favor. Everybody's gonna try to do that. Once you find somebody who wants to create a proper way to use the technology, I find that very, very, very wonderful. That is all.
Ed?
Yeah, one thing that I happened to pay very careful attention to was the voice of the moderator. And I have a strong hunch that the moderator was an AI-generated voice. They had probably typed out the questions, because the affect of the moderator's speech was very flat. Just a thought.
That is correct. That was an AI, but the questions were created by the system, not by humans interfering with the system, which is what AI is supposed to do. It is supposed to take information and then create content out of it. And so that is probably part what a fully trained AI is capable of doing, right? So it can not necessarily think for itself, because it still doesn't have the consciousness to think,
Yeah,
but
and
it
then
can create new questions and new contents.
just listening to the lack of pacing and pausing as the questions were asked was a clue for me.
Yeah, I would agree, Ed. It was, in that sense, a bit clunky. I don't think it would not surprise me that it wouldn't take much for it to be cleaner and you wouldn't be able to tell very well. Maybe we should ask McKinley if he thinks he should enable the AI companion that's integrated right here in Zoom. All right, I don't have, and I see when I go and I select on that, what it says is that we can use our AI companion to ask questions, catch up on meetings, and more. So anyway, I'm looking for my next hand in the, I have no one in the queue.
Well, McKinley wanted
oh.
to ask.
Well, I didn't know that thank you, Simona. I didn't know that I have a question. I only wanted to comment on Monty's question about tools to identify content in that AI might generate and perhaps classify them based on their helpfulness or harmfulness. That is one of the areas that researchers are looking at right now. There really is not the kind of a tool that you might have in mind, Monty. I remembered late last year at the Wall Street Journal's Tech Live event, they did a kind of a game for the audience by asking people to identify from amongst several images that were placed on the screen whether an image was real or whether an image was a deep fake generated by an AI. And the audience didn't do very well. One of the moderators who had an image of herself generated by AI placed the two images up, and the audience didn't do very well in identifying which of the images was of her real self and which of the image was a deep fake. I will have some other comments later on this, so I'll just stop there.
Okay, I'm gonna list you in the queue, but right now I'm going to go to Peter for his first comment.
Yeah, a few reflections about this presentation. Well, first that remained with me was the importance of technology, which is the applied science. It was very important starting with 19th century and even earlier, and it's even more important today, especially because of the accumulation of great volumes of information that can be used in a positive way or negative way for different purposes. And another thing that remained with me was that despite all the progress and all the important applications of the AI, also there is not, this is not perfect. Imperfect human beings cannot create perfect things. And of course, it was a question, I think Professor Harari, if an AI perfect could be created, and because it's based on mathematics and then supposed to be perfect. But he answered clearly that no, AI is not perfect. And I was thinking, first of all, I was thinking of the importance of technology, that the way it is applied, it's applied. I saw recently a movie about Oppenheimer, how he created the atomic bomb. Well, it is a very important example, and we can learn that, of course, science could create great things. It helped the United States to win the war against Japan. But also in a meeting that Oppenheimer has with President Truman, he was showing his hands and told him that my hands are full of blood. Then it was his conscience that was bothering him, that both he helped United States to win the war, with his creation, his invention was killing tens of thousands of people. Of course, AI definitely has positive applications. It can computate faster than human beings can. It can, let's say, in medicine, can give faster and better diagnosis. But also, I remember recently an example that AI is not perfect and is giving some embarrassing results. I don't know if you heard on television that they were mentioning the case of Michael Cohen, former President Trump lawyer, that he was pleading his case in court, asking that the rest of the sentence should be dismissed. And he was presenting some cases in support of his request. Well, when the judge asked him to give the examples in support of his application, embarrassing, he has to recognize that it doesn't have these examples and they were artificially created by AI. Again, it was very embarrassing. Another thing that remains with me is that with AI, you don't have to send soldiers anymore. If you have to take a decision about starting a war with a country, because just extract information and made a decision based on that information. But this is again very dangerous if we let the machines that still are imperfect to take such a great decisions for us. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Peter.
And
Yeah.
another thing that I think it's encouraging for us is the fact that we're using just 10% of our brain. And there is a lot of hope for us that maybe in the future we'll be able to find a way to use more than 10% and to compete with these machines and also come above it, of them.
Okay. Thank you, Peter, for your contribution. Simona.
It's not actually true that we use only 10% of our brain. We use 100% of our brain. But there is a capacity for connectivity that is greater than that, than most people achieve, because people don't put much work into their brain, frankly. Many people don't bother to learn. They don't bother to experience new things and learn new things. And each time people opt for just staying where they are and using what they know, they're reducing their potential for growth. But we use our capacity as is. The only thing that we can do, we can increase that capacity to a certain extent by continuous use and judicial use. I'm going to go back to something what Monty said, and then also McKinley's a comment about our ability to recognize what is true and what was created by AI. So maybe first that there is something that's called the resolution limit. So every human being has the limit to what we can recognize, and we actually curate the amount of information we see and receive in order to come to a faster outcome. So even though when you look, let's say you're looking right now at the screen, there's lots of information on that screen, but you are actually curating the amount of information you're receiving so that you can be more effective in what you're doing. Our brain cuts off lots of input that we receive through our senses in order to make sense of things. That's the reason why our perception is not perfect. But it is useful. It is giving us tools how to survive and how to do things. Compared to technology, compared to machine learning or computers or anything like that, they can process far more information and in an impassioned way, so that information can be processed without thinking, okay, well, how is this going to affect someone? Or is somebody going to get hurt? Or is somebody going to be harmed? And just come up with an outcome that is pure mathematics. Is just, this is what it comes to, right? But it doesn't deal with the emotional part of it. That's what humans do. So we have both, we are both less capable than machines and more capable than machines. We are less capable because the amount of information that we can process and the outcomes that we can come up with cannot be nearly as fast or as perfect, mathematically speaking. And yet we are more likely to come up to a morally sound decision than any machine currently in existence. At least most people are. And then I'm going back to what Monty said, and that is the issue of sources. And I keep saying this over and over to people that I communicate with. Be careful where you get your information from. Because not all sources are biased. There is no such thing as an unbiased source, because each source is going to curate the information in a certain way. But be careful where you get your information, because there are some sources that are known not to be concerned about whether something is true or not, that manipulate the information to get certain outcome. And if that outcome is supposed to be you getting angry, or you considering that somebody is doing something bad when they actually aren't, or that they're doing something good when they actually aren't, maybe it would be a good thing to take a step back and rethink where you're getting your information. You cannot eat from a garbage can, expect to get good, solid nutrition. Likewise, you cannot take your information from sources that are polluted deliberately and expect to receive good information.
Thank you, Simona. Simona, I want to, I guess, add on a little bit to what you were saying about the functioning of our brains. My understanding is that yes, we do, in fact, that we do block out information. Our brain, we pay attention to just a limited part of what our senses are picking up as an efficiency management sort of process. Another thing is, my understanding is that the brain fills in gaps. So it's another way that it not only restricts the information that comes in, but it restricts it and depends on what's already in our brains to then fill in some of those gaps. It's an efficiency thing.
That's correct. That is correct. Yes.
Which is scary in and of itself, because what it really means is our brains are making up a lot of what we perceive, or a good portion of it. And so there again, what is in our brains? How dependable is that related to any given situation that is being perceived?
So could I add something? So if you have ever worked with a software that is enhancing an image, it basically works on the same principle. So if you have an image that is kind of grainy and it's not a good quality and so on, and there are certain types of software that can enhance the image. The way how they do it, they look at the neighboring pixels. So they kind of fill in the blanks based on the neighboring pixels. Our brain often does the same thing. We add things from our experience, from what we have seen and heard and read and known before, in order to fill the picture. This is why education from early age is so important. And I'm pretty sure Elmer would agree with me. The kinds of things that you fill your brain with. What are your resources that you go to? What kind of books do you read? What kind of movies do you watch? What kind of people do you communicate with? All these things are creating this kind of background information that is filling your brain. I was actually reading an article about critical thinking, and this is something that I believe is very important and not often present in educational systems. So most educational systems these days are looking for, filling people's minds children mostly, and then young adults later, and older adults much later, with the facts. And again, the facts are curated. These are not facts, in their totality. But we don't spend much time teaching our children and ourselves how to think critically, how to look at the set of information and decide, okay, how much of this is likely? How much of this is true? How much of this I should maybe go and check the other sources and see, is this really like that? Or is there maybe some spin to it? And so critical thinking is actually is going to become one of the most important skills a human being can have for the future of humanity. And if we fail to teach critical thinking to our children, who are going to be our future and who are going to make decisions for us when we are out of power in our old age, then we are going to create a world in which neither they nor us will be able to thrive. So teaching critical thinking, knowing how to curate information correctly, knowing when to check, and knowing how not to be manipulated, these are all parts of the teaching of how to think critically.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to add one thing. We often talk about critical thinking, and oftentimes it's to evaluate what's coming in. An educator that I've got a lot of information from, Lawrence Schulman, social work educator, he talked about something called informed openness. And that's not on necessarily criticizing what's coming in, although it certainly would include that, but it's also how do we manage our own selves and our own history and our own perceptions and what we know in relation to new information coming in. So the idea there is that with informed openness is, yes, we bring a lot of information to a given situation. It would be ridiculous for us to set that all aside. We should not do that. We bring that to the situation, but along with that, we also bring an attitude of openness to new information or different information that's counter to what we already perceive to be true. And I found that to be very important in a lot of situations. The context that was given is in meeting up with a new client. That client may have, for example, a very long history in, for you who are in medicine, they may have a medical file that's 3 inches thick. In mental health or social services, some of our clients have just as thick of case files. And we should inform ourselves about that information, that history. But in our interaction with that client, when it's new, we should be informed, but also open to experiencing things differently. I think it's a good principle, and I aim for it. Don't always acquire it, but I aim for it. Simona.
There was a part of the presentation that kind of I think touched a very important part, and that's the issue of relationships in the way how we receive and how we give out information and what we trust. And what most people don't realize that our entire society is based on trust. Everything you do is based on trust. You don't go to a doctor and ask them to prove to you that they have passed, the exams, and that they, you go to them believing, trusting that they actually are who they say they are. You don't go sitting into an airplane and check whether the pilot actually knows how to fly. You trust it. You walk into a car with a person you don't know because it says taxi on it or Uber. So our entire society is based on trust. And the issue that I find truly important in that entire conversation was the issue of, lack of trust that can come up from manipulative sources. from manipulation of the AI, from abuse of AI by totalitarian or, you know, other bad actors. And I think there was this really important part of, you know, how do we act as human beings in the relationship to the world around us, and how that affects how we act later on. And I think as much as technology has made this world a much smaller place than it has also made it a much lonelier world, because people are relying on technology for their relationships much more than they rely on actual relationships, of having relationships with real people instead of, you know, people who are just names and tokens on social media. And I think that it is important for humans to widen the circle. I'm not necessarily saying abandon social media, but to live in the real world with real people, with whom they can have real relationships, and not just statements that kind of hang in the air or are written on the screen that are so good at getting a reply from us, a response from us emotionally. So perhaps this entire technological revolution also has the possibility to give us an insight into what is truly important, and this is relationships with each other, with our friends, with our families, with our communities, and with the world at large.
Thank you. Let's see, McKinley, you said you had something you wanted to say, and we're getting close to the end, so now's the time, I think.
Thank you very much, Monty. So here is my contribution to the discussion. I had previously discounted the potential risks AI might pose, choosing instead to focus on the benefits such as instantaneous access to a vast store of information, the ability to increase productivity across all disciplines and economic sectors. But watching this video helped me become more interested in understanding the risks. Combining this video with two resources, I think helps build additional understanding about the risks and benefits. First, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that tried to sort through what those risks and benefits are. And I just want to highlight a few of the risks and the benefits. And then I want to comment on the second video that Dave shared about the interview with Dr. John Lennox. So here are some of the risks that this article identified, and some of these were discussed in the video. But from the risks are real camp. AI acquires deadly expertise. AI as a creation has the potential to rebel against its creators as humans rebelled against their creator. AI in the hands of bad actors can be deployed to dangerous and deadly ends. AI potentially promotes the loss of privacy. AI can be an instrument of control. AI involves ceding rights and autonomy. And I think this is what the two speakers in the video refer to as losing agency. And then there is this so-called the ethical considerations that in the Lennox video is highlighted by this 6-track problem. Now, here are a couple of items from the risks are overblown camp. They believe that AI risks are manageable. They also believe that human creators of AI can always leverage AI creation by collaboration in more powerful ways than independently acting AI self-acquired mastery or expertise, and therefore can always have the incremental advantage to control harmful AI. Now, from the video that Dave shared and some comments that Dr. John Lennox made, I found that it provided additional insight and context, particularly relevant to the people of faith. Dr. Lennox observed that the eventual goal of AI is to solve two human challenges. The first, the problem of physical death, and the second, the problem of human happiness. He observed that the first problem has been solved over 2,000 years ago by Christ's resurrection. We've established in some of the conversations we've had in this class that the physical pathway to the resurrection outcome is thermodynamically supported. The second solution to the problem of happiness, I note that that problem of human unhappiness or happiness can be solved by the solution offered through the abundant life blessing available through Christ. So those are the kind of additional reflections that I have from watching this video and the video that Dave shared.
Thank you, McKinley. And with that, I have, let's see, is that Bertha Thompson? Did you want to, I see that you're unmuted. Did you want to add something to the conversation? Not hearing anything there. I am going to come back to Simona. I think we are here near the end.
Thank you very much. As I was listening to this, I remember the story that I read in the newspapers some time ago about the way how China controls its citizens through social media and applications on the cell phones. There was an application, I can't remember right now, I tried to find, but I really can't remember. It's kind of a buddy system where your immediate friends, family, teachers, co-workers, and so on, they have kind of a way how they can contribute to how you are seen in that group and whether or not you're a good citizen or a bad citizen. And if you're a bad citizen, then you get kind of ostracized and excluded. And I think that is probably one of the things that authoritarian regimes can do with, bad use of AI resources. On the other hand, I work with a group of brilliant people who are using AI to find better ways how to early detect and diagnose certain diseases that if treated early, maybe won't lead to blindness, for example. So as every tool, AI is going to depend on benevolence of those who use it and on knowledge of those who use it. So I'm urging you to learn more about AI because whether you like it or not, it will be a part of our lives for the future to come. It already is. And knowing more and understanding more, I think, is important so that we can be better prepared how to use it and how to stop its abuse. For the poem for the end of today, for the first Saturday in this new year, the Saturday that is an anniversary of an attack on our democracy, I have chosen a poem entitled Hope by Mary E. Tucker. As shines the sunbeam through dark clouds, hope breaks the spirit's lowering shrouds. Even as the morning dawns overnight, hope sheds her radiant, golden light. Like the soft dew to thirsting flower, hope ever revives the soul's faint hour, a soothing balm for every grief. Hope, precious hope, finds sure relief. The anchor of the tide-bound soul, with breakers near, while billows roll around about, but never overwhelm. With hope the anchor, faith the helm. Hope, like the olden shepherd star, telleth her tidings from afar. And though earth's flowers fade and die, hope revives them in the sky. And our blessing for today and the week to come. The embrace of the Father be the comfort you desire. The name of the Son be the one on whom you rely. The presence of the Spirit be with you every hour. The three-in-one be the focus of all you are. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.